What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Benefit Podcast, bringing you everything you need to know about living your best life. And this episode comes to you on a rather wet day, actually. We've had some really lovely sunshine, and it's decided to rain. So I've shut the blind a little bit. We've got the LEDs on. For those of you that are watching this anyway, you'll obviously appreciate the visual. For those of you that are listening, I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a picture about what those who are watching can see. So I hope everyone's good. I hope everyone's had a really good week so far. And the title of this episode may well be a little bit of a giveaway. I'm also just going to apologise if I sound a little bit croaky. It's been one of those weeks where just the culmination of things. Louis hasn't been well for about a week, which means most of us haven't slept very well for a week. He also then had Lara and I up until about 2:30 in the morning on Sunday night into Monday morning, being sick. So needless to say, everyone is feeling a little bit rough, but life goes on, as they say. So anyway, back into this current episode. Clean eating will never be enough. Now, what do I mean by this? I want to first start by saying that it's a very common phrase that I hear when people say, so I can sit on a call with someone, for example, I can have a chat with them, how's your training going? Really good. I'm in the gym, 3-4 times a week. I feel like I'm getting stronger, but just not really seeing I'm not just not really seeing the changes I want to see in my physique. How's the diet? And then a relatively common response will be something along the lines of, I'm eating really clean, I'm eating really healthy. And that's great, don't get me wrong. Like, what most people mean when they talk about clean eating, healthy eating, the intentions are in the right place. Like, for a lot of people, that means that they're not eating a huge amount of junk food. They're not eating takeaways. They're not eating highly processed foods. They might be focusing a little bit more on getting in the quote unquote healthy foods. And it's a good place to start, and you're probably starting to feel much better for that. Digestion is probably in a much better spot. Energy levels potentially in a better spot. But what you're probably not seeing in that instance is a huge amount of physical change. The primary reason for that is because no matter how much clean eating, healthy eating you're doing, if you're not aware of how much of those things, if you're not aware of your calories and macros that are coming in, you're always going to struggle. And a lot of the time that's also because sometimes I think either people forget that healthy foods actually contain calories. I think sometimes there's almost this thing that goes on in people's heads where they're like, well, I'm eating healthy. I'm eating avocados. I'm snacking on nuts. I'm eating lots of fruit and veg. I'm focusing on my protein. I'm having protein shakes. I'm eating protein desserts. I'm having protein bars instead of chocolate bars. Again, all of those things can be very useful, but they still all contain calories. And if you're still eating more calories than you're expending, you're still going to be gaining weight. Or if you're not eating those things in the right quantities, your body just isn't going to change in the way you want it to. Now, the reason that this is a big issue is because you can feel like you're putting in a huge amount of effort, like especially in the gym, you can be there training hard, like really putting in the work. You can feel like you're putting in a lot of work with your diet. You're focusing on this clean, healthy eating. But unless you know how much you're eating, unless you've got that control there to know that you are on a consistent basis, assuming fat loss is your goal, that you are consuming fewer calories than you're expending in a day, in a week, over time, you're not going to see the rewards. And where that will become an issue is because you could get 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line and not see a huge amount of stuff that's changed physically, visually. That's going to be pretty frustrating for you because in your head, you're thinking, I'm doing absolutely loads. I'm in the gym 4 times a week. I'm meal prepping. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And, I'm eating the clean foods. I'm eating the avocados. I'm snacking on the nuts. I'm eating loads of fruit. I'm focused on all this protein. And your body just isn't really changing as a result. All of that is going to come down to the fact that you're just not aware of the amounts. And when you start to think about the amounts, when you start to track the food that's going in, food and drink, again, also something that people can potentially forget, that it's not just the foods we eat, it's also the stuff that we drink as well. When you do start to track all of those things, you start to get an actual idea and understanding of where you're at. You might well soon realize that you're not quite where you need to be. Your calories are too high, your splits of your macros aren't quite in the right places. You might be getting absolutely loads of fats, you might be under eating your protein, you might be getting loads of carbohydrates and not enough fats. Like, until you track this stuff and until you're aware of what's going in, the progress is always going to be really, really difficult. And one of the biggest, I think one of the biggest sort of bits of, I guess, of challenge, of feedback that people will say. So, again, on those calls, I might say to someone, how is your diet? And they're telling me that they're focused on healthy eating, clean eating. And when I ask them whether they're tracking, whether they know how many calories and macros they're eating, again, it's not uncommon to hear someone say, well, yeah, I don't track, I don't weigh my food, it's a bit of a ball ache, it's a bit too much effort for me. And while I sort of appreciate where someone's coming from, I always push back on that, and the challenge back to you is always going to be, you might find it a little bit of an effort, you might find it a little bit of a ball ache to begin with. However, you're going to all of this effort to get yourself in this position, like you're in the gym, you're putting in the work, you're thinking about healthy eating. Is it that much more work? Is it that much more effort to weigh out what you're cooking, to track what you're cooking in an app? Is it really that much more effort? Because if you're not prepared to do that, your expectation of the results that are going to follow is going to be skewed. Until you are prepared to put in that effort, until you are prepared to accept that you are going to have to do something that initially you might not necessarily want to do. But I'll tell you something else that will happen when you do start tracking, when you do start weighing, when you do start logging, and when you then start to see progress happen, that ball ache becomes far, far less. You'll notice the difference, you'll notice the change. Also, if you're someone who eats relatively similarly day to day, week to week, the tracking's also pretty easy there too, because if you're using an app like MyFitnessPal, you're going to have all of your frequently used items. They're all stored, they're all at the top of your list. So actually sometimes you can just copy those across. So if you've meal prepped your breakfast for Monday through Friday, whatever that might be, like you've batched up a load of overnight oats, for example, you can just copy and paste that on each day. You've only actually got to log it once. Similarly with your lunches, if you've made up your lunches for the week and they're whatever they might be, chicken pasta salads, tuna jacket potatoes, whatever it is, again, if you've got that logged in there, tracked, weighed and everything once, it's just a copy and paste exercise. And even if you've got a few different things across your week, again, a lot of people eat relatively similarly, across a week. So actually, once you've created a recipe for something, you might make up a spaghetti bolognese, you might make up a chili con carne, you might make homemade burgers, you might make a chicken curry, you might have some sort of fish, whatever it is. Once those things are logged in there once as recipes, you've just got to pick the recipe. So a little bit of hard work to begin with actually makes your life so much easier moving forwards. Not only is it going to make your life much easier, you're actually going to see progress happen. And then that becomes, just more and more motivating, more and more momentum builds. Look, if you're really struggling to understand how to do this, please do let me know, because I've got a few little things I can send you for free. I can we can jump on and have a quick chat. Any questions on the best ways to track, how to go about it, how to manage it when you're having one thing, or your portion sizes might need to be different to your partner's or your children's, let me know. We can chat that through, because it's actually probably a lot easier than you realize. You're probably using it as a little bit of an excuse to just not do it in the first place, where I can give you loads and loads of information. I can make it really clear, and you just make your life really, really simple. And like I say, the last thing that I want people to do is go through this process where they feel like they're putting in lots of effort, but just not seeing the rewards. And so actually something simple, and it can be really simple, like weighing, tracking and logging your food, that could be the difference between having a really amazing transformation in 6 to 12 months or looking pretty much the same as you are now. So don't let those 6 or 12 months go to waste. Make that call immediately. Let me know if you need any help. All my socials at Ben Howard Fitness. Ben at benhowardfitness.com is the email address. Any questions or comments and stuff that you want to drop below wherever you're watching or listening to this, again, please do feel free to do that. But let's make sure that all of that energy and effort isn't going to waste. Let's make sure you're doing all of the right things to move you forwards, get that incredible transformation, and really see some amazing changes happen.